change people's perceptions about superheroes, and Elastigirl is our best play.
Better than me?
It's Incredibles time, and this is Mike and Chris here with your spoiler-filled review of Disney Pixar's Incredibles 2.
We're gonna let you know what we thought about the movie, but first, subscribe to GameSpot Universe for reviews and breakdowns of the movies and TV shows that we love, that you love.
That everyone loves. And again, this is a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen Incredibles 2 yet, get out of here, go away, and then come back later. So I was actually a little bit skeptical going into this movie, not just because it's been 14 years since The Incredibles 1, but I actually saw like the first 15 minutes or so a couple of months ago up at Pixar. And I think, as I said in my review, I think that the beginning of the movie is actually kind of slow. And so when I saw that footage, I was a little bit more skeptical going into this movie. And then it really surprised me after that because the rest of it is like much better.
I agree. The first Incredibles movie is not, I love Pixar, full stop, but like it's not a movie that I go back to very often. So I didn't expect a ton from this, and the trailers were fine. It's great though. I loved what I saw. You're right, the first act of the movie's a bit slow.
You think so too?
Yeah, and it's a little confusing because it jumps around to a few different things in the span of like 15 minutes.
There's two cold opens, right? There's Dickert, mind flashy Men in Black thing.
Yeah, giving the Men in Black mind wiper to a kid.
Violet's little guy friend, and then there's the fight with the Underminer, which is like, I don't think when the first Incredibles ended, I was like, it's too bad they didn't show that fight with the Underminer. I think it was just a funny place to end it. But because it's an animated movie, they can just pick it up right where the original left off, which is one of the unique things about this movie. But then it has the effect of like, it feels like we're just treading water for the first couple of scenes. And then there's like 3 scenes after that where they're just reiterating and rehashing the conflict, right? Which is that superheroes
Mike,
are illegal.
did you know superheroes are illegal?
Did you know superheroes are illegal? Because now I know after watching the first 15 minutes of this movie.
And also the last movie, where that was also a point of contention.
Right, and so it's been so long that it makes sense that they would want to rehash it. But the result is that you get a cold open followed by a cold open on a fight, followed by like the scene in the police station, the scene where they're in the car with Rick and he's dropping them off at the motel, and then they're at dinner in the motel, and then they're talking by the pool, and then they go and meet Winston and Evelyn, and then they go back to the motel and they're in bed talking, and every single one of those scenes is just about the conflict that we already know about.
Yeah. That said, I don't want to take away from the Underminer fight, because while I necessarily wasn't looking forward to something like that after seeing the first movie, it's a great big superhero fight.
Yeah, I will say that in its favor is that in the middle of all of that is it's an exciting scene to open on, and I wish they had just opened on that.
Yes.
And then, because it had some momentum.
As opposed to just opening on like a confused teenager sitting alone in like an FBI interrogation room.
Which doesn't even come up again until much later in the movie when Violet realizes that he's either ignoring her or has forgotten her somehow, and then it becomes part of Bob's arc of trying to like be a good stay-at-home dad. But they could have just not shown that at all and then flashed back to it later when Bob calls Rick to ask him.
Absolutely.
And I think it would have been a more fun reveal because then we would have been confused like about the same thing Violet is confused about, instead of knowing what happened before she does.
Well, right, because the moment she sort of reveals herself to him, you're like, oh, that's the kid whose mind got wiped.
Exactly, yeah.
So it sort of takes away from like the tension in the situation.
I feel like this is very negative, and we both really liked this
movie.
movie.
We love this movie so much.
Let's talk about what we did. Like the rest of the movie is a lot better. I was skeptical going in, and that's why. But like very pleasantly surprised by the rest of it.
For me, I mean, as with the first Incredibles movie, this is very much sort of 2 stories happening sort of simultaneously. In the first one, Mr. Incredible goes off and goes on his island adventure with Jason Lee, Syndrome, right?
Sure.
And then the family is at home sort of figuring out what's going on. In this one, it's Elastigirl who gets to go off on her own like super badass adventure.
Right, I love that.
And she's got a cool motorcycle, and she talks about like what at times used to be like when she like had a mohawk and was fighting crime by
I want to see that movie.
I want so badly to see an Elastigirl prequel.
Punk biker Elastigirl fighting crime. prequel movie.
But while that's happening, I feel like the family side of the story is even stronger in this movie.
I thought that way too. I thought that too.
Mr. Incredible wants so badly to be out there being the one saving the day.
Right, and he's kind of a butthole. He's like, it's really hard for him to tell Helen that he thinks she's gonna be great because he wants to be the one out in the spotlight. And I thought, like, he's a flawed character. He's not like, he's kind of in the Marvel mold of superheroes in that he's Mr. Incredible, but he's not perfect, right? He's a flawed character who you can kind of identify with.
Absolutely.
So how do you think that this movie compares to the original?
For me, I like it a lot more. As I said before, I don't really revisit the first Incredibles a lot. I'm gonna watch this movie again and again and again. We haven't touched on the visuals. Visually, it is such a far superior movie to the original in almost every way.
I don't think that's I agree with you. I think it's better than the original. And I don't think that the visual improvement is only technological, right? Because obviously, animation technology and techniques has improved a ton in 14 years. But I think also just aesthetically, this movie is so far beyond, like, it uses the mid-century setting and it just pervades everything about the movie. Every shot, every character, every setting, every prop. I love little details like the fact that the tool that Edna gives him to control Jack's powers, it doesn't look like an iPad, right? Like there's...
It looks like a crazy controller with all kinds of things going on.
Yeah, there's a lazier version of it, I think, where their futuristic technology from in the mid-century setting more closely resembles technology that we have today because it's easier for us to identify as the audience. It's an easier reference point for the artists, but it seems like they took great pains to come up with their own versions of, because the iPad hadn't obviously been invented. I mean, like, it's not like there's a specific year setting for these movies,
Absolutely.
But all of the technology has like that retro future vibe, and it's little things like that that are so cool, and that this movie does much better than the original.
In a lot of ways, it reminds me of sort of like, at least architecturally, The Rocketeer. I look at a movie like The Rocketeer and it just looks different, and just the way the buildings are shaped, the way it's lit. Like just the way there's one shot of the city where you see, it's like during a sunset, and there's this orange that kind of washes over everything, and it looks incredible.
It looks so good. It just looks so good. And I think even beyond that, like the plot structure and all the other characters they bring in, I like much more than the original. Even though I like the original. I watched it recently. I watched it like around Christmas time with the family, and yeah. And I liked it a lot, and I think this movie just surpasses it in every way.
Which, I mean, 14 years later, especially, not only 14 years, but 14 years and roughly 17 million superhero movies later,
right.
I'm surprised that it was able to be this good. And if it took this long to get it right, I'm glad it took this long to get it right.
Yeah, they waited a long time, and they could have easily, I mean, look at, it's not like Pixar is afraid of sequels, right?
No, they're not.
They churn out a lot of sequels, and not all of them are this good. And
Since the first Incredibles, there have legit been 3 Cars movies.
Yeah.
Clearly they're okay with sequels.
They did a Finding Nemo.
They did a Finding Nemo sequel,
right? Like,
there's a spin-off Cars movie called Planes. So sequels, and like anyone who's been watching Disney movies all their life knows that the company is not afraid of a sequel. And they usually jump the gun a little too quickly. I'm glad they took their time with this one, and it shows in the finished product.
I think 14 years is maybe too long.
I would listen. I hope we get an Incredibles 3. I'm gonna say 5 years.
I hope they never do
5 years.
I hope they never do a Coco sequel though. That movie's perfect.
Coco is there are some movies that are just perfect standalone. So, do you think Elastigirl's the star of the movie?
Yeah, I think she completely steals the show. Holly Hunter is amazing. And I didn't really become a fan of hers specifically until The Big Sick. She played the mom, and I just thought that she was like so charismatic, so unique in that role. And then when I went back and watched The Incredibles, I went, oh, I really like Holly Hunter, and she was totally awesome in this movie.
And I would say in a world where we get so many male-driven superhero movies, we're starting to get female-driven superhero movies, but like the fact that The Incredibles 2 can do that, it's not even only the female-driven, it's the mom-driven superhero movie. Like that's exciting.
Yeah, super cool. And the Elastabike is
The Elastabike is
awesome.
the best.
So cool.
Move over Batmobile. I'm sorry.
I can't believe how creatively they used the Elastabike, like when she's letting it fall behind and then
jumping.
it hits it to launch into the air. When she's on the crane and she spins it around, I was like, how do you even think of that?
So inventive.
So
it makes me
cool.
feel so uncreative. Like when I think about like someone sat in an office and thought up this amazing break apart motorcycle
Yeah.
that her superpowers make even cooler.
Right. When I was up at Pixar a couple of months ago, they showed us kind of the breakdown of the anatomy of that scene where she's chasing the hover train from storyboard to the final product, and it's so cool to see what goes into that. And it honestly makes me watch the movie a lot differently. But like for example, in the storyboards, they had her doing that separation trick to jump on every single time the bike left the bike, got into the air. And they wound up changing it because that kind of lessened the impact of how cool it was when she did do that.
I'm very glad they cut back on it.
Yeah, so like all the jumps, like from the building to the billboard onto the train at the end of that scene, those were all like...
Just a series of slingshots?
Yeah, and they changed it, and I just think like the amount of thought and detail that goes into a scene like that is so cool, and that's something Pixar just does better than anywhere else.
Really good at the details.
Yeah.
They're really good at the details.
So what do you think of Mr. Incredible, obviously?
He yes, Elastigirl is the star of the movie. I think he gets the most character development though. There is so much going on as he gets used to the idea of being sort of a full-time dad, and that it's not easy, and it's very difficult. There's so many challenges. Math is super hard. His daughter is getting ready for her first date,
Also, she can turn invisible.
who can turn invisible, which is used throughout the movie at the exact right times.
It's so good when when she goes to the freezer to get the
ice cream.
and it's just her sweater. Excellent.
Oh, so
Very
good.
But also, so Mr. Incredible's scenes are the funniest. There's so much humor that they get out of just him like never sleeping, being exhausted, like the visit to
Just
Edna.
the dead-eyed look in his face after like 3 days with Jack
Yeah.
is perfect.
Really good. Violet and Dash, I think, more or less stayed the same in this movie. Like, I don't think either of them got a lot of development. Like in the first movie, Violet sort of came out of her shell throughout the course of the movie because for the first time their parents encouraged them to use their powers, and then by the end she was more confident, and that's how she was able to talk to her guy.
Right.
And I think in this movie there was a little bit less of that.
I think there was a little bit less. I like the fact that they sort of gave her just like normal teenager problems to sort of deal with. They couldn't go too heavy into it because there's only so much time to tell the story they're
Right,
telling.
and they had all the other characters that they had to introduce.
But I am glad they at least touched on the fact that like, no, she's also a teenage girl who has this like the problems that a teenage girl would have.
And same with Dash. It's like, again, I think I've said it before, but like, I hate math. So like, I related very hard to Dash's problems in this movie.
I related very hard to Dash's love of Johnny Quest.
That was such a good. I love that little moment when they're just watching Johnny Quest.
And I like anytime the TV is on and Dash is in the room, like I feel like his eyes go wider because he's just so tuned into anything on the screen.
Shoveling sugary cereal into his mouth, watching Saturday
Sugar
morning
bombs,
cartoons.
yeah.
Love that.
And then there was Jack, who I feel like is the breakout piece of
Jack.
amazing in this movie.
I never thought that I would love a baby character this much because most of the time it's just they go for the easy jokes. And there is one poopy diaper joke in this movie, which you get one. You get one poopy diaper joke when there's a baby, and they did one at the beginning.
And it
was fine.
It was very quickly and very well done. Like it was a super simple one.
It was the best case scenario because I've had enough of them throughout the history of media, and I don't need any more.
Man, you are gonna hate the rest of movies and TV.
Yeah, any movie with a baby, it's got to be like 400 poopy diapers. We get it.
But then they veered into like the more important stuff, which is like Jack has like
oh my God.
every superpower that's ever been a thing.
Jack's powers are like my life fuel now.
He's a laser gun.
They're so good.
He
Yeah,
turns
let's try to
into a
list them.
demon.
Turns into a demon. He lights himself on fire.
He can disappear.
multiply. He can disappear into another dimension.
He can phase through walls.
He can phase through hard surfaces. Don't forget, he could turn himself into like a weird silly putty. Like when the raccoon is trying to punch him and his face is just like, what even is that power? Do we say he can multiply?
He can multiply, that's
I wonder
right.
what the limit of his multiplication is. I wonder if he can help Dash with his math homework because he's so good at multiplication.
Good one.
Yikes. And then they revealed later in the movie he can grow really big.
Yeah, he can turn into a gigantic baby.
Giant baby
like
Jack.
Giant baby.
I was like dying. I was in my seat just like wailing with laughter. When giant baby Jack.
We have to talk about his epic showdown with the raccoon.
It's such a good scene. I can't believe how good that scene is.
Learned at the junket for this movie, that was actually originally written for a version of that was written for the first movie.
Yeah, they said that in the trip too.
That I'm so glad because like that I feel like something like that would have gotten lost in the first movie with all.
Yeah,
that was
where
going
I
on.
don't know where that would have gone in the first movie.
I have no idea
Because it's like such a good scene.
And it's the hero versus his first supervillain. Which is such a weird thing to be like. He sees the robber with the mask on TV.
Yeah, the parallel between the raccoon.
And he sees a robber stealing from him.
The parallel
That's a
between the
supervillain.
raccoon and the show, the back and forth, is so perfect because they could have done that scene without that, and he could just be fighting a raccoon and it would be funny. But they set it up so well, and you know exactly what's going to happen as soon as he starts looking from the screen to the door. You're like, ah.
And both of them put up a pretty good fight.
It's so
like
good.
I love it.
So Winston and Evelyn are the two other major new characters, Bob Odenkirk and
Catherine Keener.
Catherine Keener.
That's
Thank
right.
you. What did you think of them?
I listen. I love Bob Odenkirk and Catherine
Bob
Keener.
Odenkirk.
Like I
And
love
Catherine
them
Keener.
in everything. So when they announced that they were in the cast, I was really excited. I appreciate that Odenkirk's character looks like Bob Odenkirk.
He really does.
Like I like when they do stuff like that. But I thought they were both good characters. I thought Catherine Keener sort of tipped her hand a little bit early. I'm sorry, Evelyn tipped her hand a little bit early.
Yeah.
Catherine Keener does not play herself in this movie.
Right. She does play a character.
Yes.
Named Evelyn.
Evelyn
Dever.
Evelyn Dever. Winston and Evelyn Dever.
Right. AKA, she's also the screenslaver. Which, if you didn't see that coming,
you were not watching.
You were not paying attention
because
or you're a kid and that's fine. You haven't gotten used to like the rhythms of narrative and like the way that they set things up because it was so obvious. And that's my number one complaint with this movie is that literally in her first scene she has a line where she goes, "Or maybe superheroes are bad." Forget I said that. And it's like, oh, okay, so you're the screensaver. Cool.
As we were seeing it, you actually leaned over to me to be like, oh, she's the villain.
As soon as she says that. And they have a conversation about it later once it's revealed where she reiterates, you know, my brother, my dad relied on these superheroes and they failed him. And if they hadn't put their trust in superheroes, then, you know, maybe our parents would still be alive, which she already is, like, they could have just had that be the reveal of what her motivation is, instead of they just take out that one line, right? Because Winston's like, if superheroes, his thing is if superheroes were legal still, then when
they
my
would have been there
dad
to save my parents.
called, yeah, exactly. And she has a different interpretation, which we didn't need to learn when we did learn it, and it makes it so obvious.
What I will say, as far as the Evelyn screenslaver thing goes, is thank God it wasn't Winston.
Right.
Because that would just be rehashing what happened in the first movie.
Yeah, that too.
So, like, at least they went a little bit different with it. They just shouldn't have told us from the beginning, by the way, this is the villain.
By the way, she doesn't like superheroes, but she's pretending that she does.
But still, I will say, the visuals associated with Screenslaver,
oh, yeah.
like in the theater, like I was like, oh, like I felt like I had to look away from the screen because it was very aggressive on the eyes.
I thought that Screenslaver was a cool villain with a cool aesthetic, and
and cool powers.
the fake out, right? The misdirect with the pizza guy and all that stuff would have been really cool if they hadn't telegraphed it so obviously. So it's still B- on the screen. We don't rate things, but if we were to, B- on that villain.
I'll give you a B.
It's fine. We don't have to agree. So Chris, lastly, what did you think of all of the new characters? And also Frozone, who's still in this movie, but is like very much still a side character.
He's in it a bit more than he was in the first movie, I feel like. At least there's that.
Was he?
I
feel like it was about the same. It's still not a lot.
Yeah, not enough. I love the new characters they introduced. Like I thought Void was really cool.
I really like Void. Her powers are Portal
It's
the game,
Portal.
but from just her hands. And every scene, every fight she's in, she uses them so creatively.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. Like there's that scene in the trailer where Jack is just running. He's trying to run away, but he's just running endlessly through these portals. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I loved her. I thought reflux is just a funny joke.
Super gross.
It's an old dude with acid reflux and burning vomit. Like that's great.
And then every time he's like, and they show all I was like,
yeah, it's
gross.
It's intense to look at, but I enjoy it.
I think kids are gonna like that. That's like a joke.
That is for sure gonna sell a toy.
Like,
yeah. But what I liked about all of these new heroes is that it opens up the world more. There's so much more to like when we got to the end of the first Incredibles. Yes, the family was still front and center, and like if you wanted to expand further, you could. They did the expanding in this one. They did the heavy lifting to open up new possibilities for the future.
Also, if you remember in the first movie, Syndrome had murdered every other hero. Like,
yeah,
there were several scenes that implied or outright said that he had killed basically every other
and the Incredible family, the Pars were all that was left.
And Frozone.
Oh, and Frozone.
And as far as we knew, that was it. So it's cool to see a new generation coming up.
These are heroes that haven't like had the chance to be superheroes before. So I'm just saying, Incredible Academy.
Yeah, spin-offs, TV shows, cartoons. Let's do it.
I mean, listen, supers are legal now. It's game on.
Yeah.
One character we haven't touched on yet. Underminer is not captured.
Where's the Underminer?
The first fight of the movie was them trying to stop the Underminer, and he got away with all of the money.
They had 14 years to figure out how to wrap up the Underminer story, and he is the one character that is absolutely just a loose end that never gets tied up.
And if you stayed until the end of the credits, I don't know if you caught this, there's like a little stick figure drawing of Underminer going, like digging up out of the ground in his little like tunnel thing.
His miner.
Yes. And then just
Miner-mobile.
And then just driving away.
Yeah, the end credits, speaking of which, are super creative, and it's worth staying just to watch the animation. It's really cool. But yeah, that's the last thing, is the thing coming out, and he's just like, doo, 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 doo.
And that's how the Underminer wins again.
If we have to watch another Underminer fight in The Incredibles 3,
I want Incredibles 3 to open with them fighting, and be like, really, again? We're doing this again? And then they just catch him instantly.
Please no. I have one other note about the cast of characters, which is interesting. Frozone's wife, Honey, who we only hear off screen sort of bickering with Frozone every time he...
Where is my super suit?
Woman. It's good. It's a good joke. There's an earlier version of the movie where she was actually in the movie and she appeared.
Oh.
And they... I learned this on the trip up there. And they cut her because there are already enough new characters, and it's like a good joke. It's like a funny joke that she's just yelling at him off screen all the time. But it got far enough that they had a design and a character model and an animation for her. And then they cut her, and Brad Bird said that the character model that was going to be Honey is in the movie somewhere. They reused her for something else. I don't know who or what or where she appears, but that'll be something fun to try to figure out later.
It's up to you to find Honey.
It's up to you. I'm not gonna do it.
Me neither.
I don't care that
I got
much.
stuff.
Yeah. Okay, one last thing I want to talk about is this movie is coming out in a very different landscape than the original did in terms of where superhero movies are in the larger pop culture sense. How do you think this movie fares compared to all the other superhero movies that are out? We're in a post-MCU, post-Infinity War somehow world, and I think that it plays a little bit differently than the original did.
Well, I mean, it's wildly confusing because Thanos isn't in this movie anywhere.
Yeah, I don't get it. Where was the
looked for him,
where was
like,
Thanos?
what were you up to, Josh Brolin? Come on.
Can you imagine if that was if there was a
Like,
stinger?
like Thanos just walks by in the background of
No,
this-
cartoon Thanos turns around. I'll do it myself. You're like, what? Be good.
That'd be great. But no, I think it works really well because it's not a superhero movie. Like, it is a family film
yeah.
with sort of the superhero garnish on top. When I see Mr. Incredible, like, at home with the kids, Iron Man wouldn't do that ever.
Yeah.
Like, Iron Man's not a stay-at-home dad. He never would be.
Hawkeye would, but that's why he's not.
Well, but
he's not in that
Hawkeye's
movie.
only doing it because he's legally required to under house arrest. AKA, we need to get him out of the movie somehow.
I think. Did we just spoil Infinity War? If you haven't seen Infinity War by now, you don't care.
If you didn't know Hawkeye
Don't come-
wasn't in Infinity
don't
War,
at me, don't comment. I don't care.
at me. I'll come for you.
I think that the first Incredibles movie, being a good superhero movie in 2004, felt super novel, and it was like, oh my god, a good superhero movie. And now it's just, hey, another good superhero movie.
Yeah.
It just feels a little bit less special. Even though the movie is good, it's nothing against the movie. It's just the context is a little bit different, which I think it just changes how we look at it, which is interesting.
I can definitely see that. Yeah, that's sort of why I like my mind is framing it as like it's not like a comic book movie. It's finding a different way to tell like the family drama comedy. It's just you doing it with people who can fly and stuff
Fly and stretch their arms and turn into demons.
and ride cool motorcycles.
So cool. So what do you like most about The Incredibles 2?
Oh man, I loved how well it captured sort of the tone of this family and this franchise. Visually, it knocked my socks off more than probably any other Pixar movie I've seen.
I think the
period.
aesthetic of Coco was a little more unique, but
I keep forgetting about Coco, which
Yeah.
is so fantastic.
yeah. You can't forget about Coco.
I'm sorry.
Coco's my that instantly became my #1 favorite Pixar movie ever, and it remains so, even though Incredibles 2 is
Makes
up
me
there.
cry.
So you got more, we're at 2.
I love that Elastigirl gets her own superhero adventure.
That's 3.
I love that,
Stop counting.
I'm sorry.
Keep going.
And I love that like Bob is the one staying at home and dealing with the family, and
I like
Jack.
the action. I want to call out the action.
Yes.
Like not just Elastigirl on her bike, but every single fight is so creative because every character that's powered has such unique powers, from Screenslaver to like the screechy owl guy. I don't even remember his name, but he's just a screechy owl man. He's just an owl boy who just swoops in, and he's an owl. Like I could not tell you what his powers.
Imagine Vulture from like the Spider-Man animated series, but an owl.
Is super weird, but even like the big guy who's just, my name's Brick, and he just knocks stuff over.
Like the entire like extended fight sequence on the boat
So
is
good.
insane.
Especially as they all start out on one side from the kids, and then as they're one by one having
As their
their
hypno glasses
the
get
glasses
broken.
get ripped off, then they switch sides, and it's even fun just keeping track of who's on which side during that fight. And it's like this extended sequence where people are switching sides, and at the end there's like one. They're like, wait, what about that? Ah! It's so good. It's so creative. It's so fun. It's a beautiful movie. It's funny. Jack.
And shout out to the one last fight scene that really stuck with me is Elastigirl and Screenslaver in that apartment, and how Elastigirl gets like caught in that crazy hypno room.
Yeah.
And I
trying to-
was freaking out as she was stuck, and I'm like, no, this can't be happening.
She's trying to cover her eyes and fight at the same time. Just sort of, it's a very different situation for her where she suddenly can't open her eyes, and even that is it's so creative. Like the choreography, obviously we're not limited by the bounds of being in
Physics?
live action. It's animated, and so they can do anything they want as long as it doesn't stretch our suspension of disbelief too much. And I think that they really like push it to the limits, and it's super cool.
so good.
What did you not like?
As we sort of covered, the first act is very slow, and it just keeps rehashing the same thing over and over and over again. They could have done it once, and I would have been fine. Just have them talking outside the hotel at the pool.
They could have cut like any of like 3 of those 5 scenes at the beginning after the Underminer fight.
And it would have been great.
We get it. I also think that they, as we talked about, it was so obvious.
Yeah.
It was so obvious that she was the screenslaver, and they blew that surprise way too early.
But that said, while it wasn't much of a surprise, that getting to see her brother realize what was going on was done really well, because he was heartbroken.
That's true. This is the section on things that we didn't like, but let's talk. It was like a good dynamic between them, and that was
I'm upset that Bob Odenkirk is such a good voice actor, and the character was written so well.
It was really emotional.
It was the reveal of the villain was not a surprise at all. I'm glad at least they showed us like other people's reaction to it.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Now that you all have seen The Incredibles 2, let us know what you thought in the comments below. You can hit us up on Twitter. I am at Rogue Cheddar. He is at Chris Hayner, surprisingly. And tell us what you thought.